welcome everyone to this session about literature and nature, but there's a second part to the title, which is the ecological turn, and that's really the important part that we are going to concentrate on. It's a real pleasure to be here again at this wonderful festival, and I would like to thank Mathrubhumi International Festival of Letters for the invitation. And I would also like to thank Sabine Iqbal, the very talented writer and curator of literary events. I think he comes up with really brilliant ideas and very good lineup for the international program of this festival. So our topic looks at writing or responding artistically to nature. That's something that's been done since time immemorial. But more recently, we realize that that humans have actually destroyed nature, that they have destroyed the environment, that we have a very negative impact on our environment. And whether it's the natural environment, fauna, flora, the seas. We fill the seas with plastic, and we are really, without exaggeration, killing our planet. And this is something that's been exercising the imagination of writers and artists, and also it's something that has become a kind of political issue. It's a political issue for obvious reasons. It's a political issue in the sense that there are people who deny climate change, and there are people who are very much active in working on that front and trying to protect the environment and reverse this damage. So this is really what we're going to be talking about. How can poetry respond? How these three poets address this issue in their work, and what is the impact of poetry on audiences, on readers, on people who come and witness a performance or see a poetry film on that subject. So I will start by asking you three, one by one, the same question. How did you start dealing with the theme? Because as I said, it's something that we really have realized quite recently. And now even, for instance, arts funding bodies are requiring artists to give this some consideration, this topic. So things have changed quite a lot. There are government measures to protect the environment and so on. But how can art and poetry deal with this subject, and when did you start yourself? Zoe, please.
Thank you. Yes. Well, it's such a joy to be here in Kerala and also in India to talk about this subject, because, in fact, I really started writing poetry in India, although at the other end of the country, in the Himalayas. I was a volunteer teacher in Woodstock School, Mussoorie, 1990 to 1991, and that's actually when I started writing. And the beginning of writing poetry went hand in hand for me with realizing a lot of things about landscapes and place and my place in landscapes. With there, as I began to write, perhaps they were the reason that I started writing. And so I was spending time hiking into these beautiful mountains. So you could go one way, and the landscape just seemed to go on and on. So that idea of just the space that was there. It was incredible coming from the UK, where everything is much more packed in. The idea that these mountains could just go on, and you could be in this space where you feel tiny, and you see glaciers and mountains, and they're huge, and so it gives you quite a different sense of human scale. So one way there was that, and the other way you could look down to the plains in the evening, and you could see these beautiful sunsets and this line of pollution, which people love, the winter line. It was a beautiful thing, this sort of grey cloud and then the sunset behind it. But it was caused by human activity, and of course this is not just to do with India. Also, when I looked at those mountains, very often I would see plantation woodland that was replacing the forests that had been there before. And so you could really read the traces of a colonial past, and this idea of kind of making use of every bit of the landscape, extracting from the landscape. And this was extremely visible and unavoidable. And so at the same time, I was working with people, both from India and other countries, who were very interested in these issues. I met some really visionary people at that time, so that was also kind of going into my thinking. There was an encounter with the philosophies that come through Hinduism and Buddhism, which are really different from the kind of thinking that you get from a Judeo-Christian tradition in terms of the place that humans have in relation to the world. And so all of this was part of it. And also, quite often you would be aware of nature actually sort of living inside you if you drank the wrong water. So you have a very intimate relationship with little creatures like amoebas and giardias and all the other things. So this was, but also you realize that you are just an organism among other organisms, and maybe in the speed and haste of life lived in the West, you can pretend that you're not. But in India, these things became very obvious to me and were completely revolutionizing in terms of my life and thinking and creativity.
Thank you, Zoe, for this brilliant introduction to the topic, and for telling us how you started thinking about it. It was really inevitable from what you told us. And Ulrike, will you give us your answer to the question?
Yeah. There are many different answers to this. So I keep thinking on how it all started for me. But I think I need to just to get to start a bit earlier than when I started really being a poet. So, but I'll try to cut it short, really. So. You should perhaps know that I grew up in a very, very small country compared to Indian standards. So it was called the GDR, so East Germany, the socialist part, the communist part of Germany. And I grew up in a rural area that despite being just a couple of villages, was under the influence of steel and paper factories. So, and that's why the first river that I saw with my own eyes that would have a natural color, I saw it after the wall came down and new filtration systems were installed in the factories. Same for the ground all around me. So we had due to the steel factory that had some leaks. there were shiny black stones that we as children would collect because we would love them very much. I don't know the English name for that, but they are beautiful. But they're man-made. They are due to factory leaks. So when I started writing, nature, being a village girl, was of course part of what I wrote about, but I wasn't aware of how much nature inside of in my poems was already nature that was changed, of course, by human influence. I just wrote about where I came from. So for me, this was, of course, political poetry, but not eco-political poetry, while it was all the time. So, and what made me, like quite late in my life, I feel, being really aware of this was the Friday for Future movement that I believe, of which I believe it's pretty strong in India as well. So an international movement of basically students and school children skipping school on each Friday to go on the street and demand their governments to take action to fight against climate change. And that made me think about what language what words I could found about my vocabulary, about me being an organism in an already polluted environment. And this is when I started to be really conscious about something that was already part of my poetry, because it was part of what I experienced.
Yes, thank you. And what you said reminded me of my own childhood, not so far from where you grew up in the Czech Republic, what's called Czech Republic today, but I won't go into details. Actually, would it be possible for one of the people in charge of this session to talk to the next venue, to ask them to lower the volume a little bit? It's really difficult to talk against this. And it kind of goes down and up again, so I always think it's going to be okay, and then it isn't. It was very loud in some of the other sessions, so maybe they can control the volume and turn it lower.
But thank you guys for being here and
Yes.
staying and focused, really.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that you can hear us quite clearly, but actually the sound comes at us from the side, and it's not very pleasant. It's noise pollution, you know. So, Adrian.
Yeah, talking about childhood, it suddenly put me back as a child. And I was thinking that I learnt this poem called When Daddy Fell into the Pond. And at family meetings, everyone would ask me to say this poem, When Daddy Fell into the Pond. And then I thought, oh, that's strange, because, yeah, maybe that's the beginning of ecological awareness, when something close goes into disaster and has to escape this pond. And then later at art college, I was, in the 90s, I was reading Deleuze and Guattari, 1,000 Plateaus, and getting interested in the concept of the rhizome, this growing point that's always growing and changing and moving and flowing and creating different planes of immanence and becoming, and all this terminology from 1,000 Plateaus, this book. And I found that was very linked to nature, environment, human, non-human, body without organs, sort of breaking everything down as a continuum. No outside, no environment on the outside and humans on the inside, changing that position of the observer. And then after that, I met Luna, and we worked together. We met in 2000. We've worked together for 25 years now. And we were in a poetry conference in Paris. And at this conference, Alexander Jodorowsky appeared. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a Chilean filmmaker. And he's a bit of a maverick and shaman, psycho-magician, He does a lot of stuff, a lot of great films, and a great poet. And they sort of are a bit funny with him in terms of poetry, because it can be a bit snobby. So they said to him, what do you think poetry is, Alexandra? And he said, poetry is the shit of a frog after it's eaten a dragonfly. So in that process, I think we came together as a very strong ecological unit, because you have this transformation, you have the waste, the cyclical nature of nature, the recycling of nature, waste becoming something else, becoming like a fertilizer, something growing again, the transformation of something beautiful from the dragonfly to the frog, and the movement through the body and out of the body into the environment. So I think that's that.
Thank you, Adrian. Now I'd like to ask, again, pose the same question to each of you, and that will be to tell us a bit more, in more detail, how you work with this theme, how you, what are the processes, what are the formal processes, and also to give us a poem. Zoe, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So, so as I said, I started sort of thinking about these ideas as I began to write, and weirdly, I think for those first few years, it felt as though it wasn't necessarily an urgent question for everybody, and I was very interested in sort of writing about natural spaces, and that word natural is quite a kind of tricky word, because it can mean all sorts of things. And I felt also in my writing that I had to try and think about lots of different perspectives and angles, and try different things. So for a long time I was really thinking about the city, which was perhaps as far away from those kind of unspoilt mountain landscapes as you could get. And I was thinking about constructed environments, and the page also as a kind of constructed environment, like a building. And but in fact, all the time I thought I was writing about cities. I was still writing about the natural world, or the connection between the man-made and natural, or there's this term nature culture, which has been used by the writer Donna Haraway, which I found very useful, that nature and culture are always intertwined. And so when I'm thinking about the form of a poem, I'm thinking about, what do I do with language, which is such a human thing, and how can we make that speak with, for, alongside other creatures, beings, our spaces, the spaces we inhabit, when we only have this very kind of human perspective to work with. So that's always a kind of a challenge to me, and a sort of difficulty, or how do you make space between the words for something else to come through? And so I've often been very interested in working with sound, and so I think that's an interest that we share. And so sometimes working alone, as I did on Friday, and just sort of using sound alongside the poetry, and sometimes performing with my husband, Alan Holmes, who is a musician and works a lot with field recordings. So sometimes we've tried to make audible spaces for other voices, other ways of listening. And but even just reading a poem on the page, I think that I'm very interested in those white spaces as a kind of silence where something else can come through. You're making a space of attention in the writing where something else can happen. And more recently, I have this book, A Marginal Sea. Again, I've been thinking about place. I've been thinking about where I'm based on the island of Anglesey, or Ynys Môn, which is just off the coast of Wales. And so very far from here, but we're near the sea, and of course the seas all join up. And so I'm really interested in the sea as that kind of space of interconnection. And so part of the book is dealing with that. But I thought actually what I'd read is a little bit of a sequence about birds. Because so one of the issues that we're dealing with is the collapse of biodiversity. We're losing so many species, and sometimes just knowing the names of birds or other creatures, or even little tiny organisms that we don't think about or don't like to think about, it can help us to value and understand the whole scale of life forms to which we belong. And the interesting thing about being in Wales is that it's an environment that is described in at least 2 languages, but the language of Welsh being a very important way of talking about the landscape, and a lot of knowledge about landscape and creatures is encoded in the history of that language and its culture. So I don't write in Welsh, but I read some, and it's thinking about the poetry of birds in both Welsh and English in Wales that has kind of informed what I'm about to read. So the curlew is a bird that's really is losing its breeding grounds. It's becoming very rare, but it's been written about very famously by Welsh poets. And so I'm going to read a little sequence of 3 poems, but also thinking about the names of the birds, but also the fact that the birds themselves don't have names. So they don't have a language in order to say what their name is. So the last part of the poem is trying to explore that question. Okay, so just one moment while I get myself ready here. So it's in 3 parts. And it's called Birds of Anglesey. Right, and it starts with the Welsh name of each bird. Yeah. Gulfinir, curlew, Numenius arquata. Fluting shade, fluting on water, its spring sun, its war again still, and its scissor and scalpel into the sludge. A curlew calling on the edge of Europe, errant in whose airspace, sky darkling croon, confused alarms, tactic and strategy. Here come invisible hounds, the dead vibrating out of voice, in instant composition, or composition of instants. A courier running and losing ground in lieu of this tidal absence, just about holding a tune. Okay, and next one. Pioden vor, oystercatcher, Hematopus australigus. Lined up on the shore, snipping brightly at, oh, whatever, there's too much to read in the mud, these letters that float at the center of things we're on the side of, cracked open, where I'm alive, I'm a stranger, squeaking in drizzle, orange-pink legs, beak against monochrome, cockle, drill, hammer and tongs going, each of us, several already, and stranger still, flexed wingspan, this muscle of belonging on the no-joke horizon, how far will it extend? So you just have to bear with me a little second because I've invited a guest for this next little ending. Right. Okay. Could you hold it for me? Oh yeah, thank you. Right. Okay. Talorahelic, willow warbler, Philoscopus trochilus, Vitis, Piecus, Vitis physica, Puyo Vitis, Louis Grosso, Mosquitero musical, Falosa musical, Kucham situ, Kucha mbuga, Timba, Nini, Pili Pili sa mabaleti, Hofsanger, Uno Toye, Vilo Kuruvi.
Next, Adrian, will you talk about how you approach the theme we are discussing here, and you will invite your collaborator and partner Luna Montenegro to do a poem. Okay.
So I think we work together, we collaborate together, we collaborate with in other projects with other disciplines, ecologists, marine biologists, sociologists, psychologists, normal people, whatever that is, I don't know. Anyone really, we're happy to work with. I think we're very also interested in sound poetry and responding in sound somehow, responding to a tree, using a tree maybe as a score for a poem, whatever that may be, whatever it evokes, like this incredible tree here that grows up, so it might have a rise. So to use the natural environment as a score for poetry. So poetry isn't just always, it needs to be on the page, but also in a living, improvisational environment. And then the birds, and the birds here, we were thinking of trying to relate in some way. And then we have this poem from a while ago, which is, it's called No Eels, and it sort of deals with Anglo-Saxon English, Old English, current English, the disastrous Brexit vote that happened in the UK. And he thinks about these eels, the European eel, and its voyage out into the sea, and then back to lay its eggs out in the Saragossa Sea, and then it comes back and goes around Europe, and people eat it, and whatever. No eel, no eel, no eels, nor pie, nor way, no way, no way.
No thing. There is nothing. Nothing. Things are nothing. Her story is no thing. Are no thing. No thing is no eels. No seal. No seal. No ale. No ealu. No aluz, no alo, no all, no alumen, no alut, no alu, no alus, no olu.
No sorcery,
No agic,
no e-deals,
no ideals,
no o-deals,
no you deals, no feel. No is no.
no.
Is no.
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 Welcome. Come ease. All come. Tog e thing. Ting thing. Numbers. No caste. No class. No race.
No ism,
No race,
no race,
no ism,
no ism,
caste,
no
no caste,
ism,
no class, no race, no
ism.
ism, no ism. This thing, this tiny, tiny in things, new things, mute things, new things happen in
Happenings spread, flow words, flow forwards, flow song, birds fly, planes flies, fly, fly, fruit fly.
hi, hi,
That's high.
hi, hi,
Higher,
hi, hi.
too high.
Can you stop it?
Stop the noise.
Can you defy the linguistics?
Egomaniacs,
Divided nations,
wave crashes,
media hunts,
swim backwards,
reverse the wave,
swim in body waves,
back into
eel-friendly,
eel-friendly, eel pits, glass eels, smoking 88-year-old European eels, now jellied. Eel blood,
is a toxic serum.
tin drum,
Lap on drift,
cross currents, estuaries, multicultural reality.
Thank you. We remembered Brexit just recently because it was 5 years since it came into, it actually took effect in terms of, setting boundaries to what we can do. And the reason why people voted for it, for the departure of the of Britain, the UK, from the European Union was to protect our borders, to protect our fish and to prevent others from fishing in our waters. But of course, fish and birds and, you know, all sorts of animals don't care about borders. They migrate in ways in which they migrated for centuries and millennia. So we now have a lot of problems with what Brexit caused, and at the same time, this made me smile, and and it's a kind of reminder of what happened. So, Ulrike, would you like to tell us about how you work with this theme and give us a poem? And then I think after that we will be opening it up to the audience, maybe, yeah, because I have a third question I want to ask you, but maybe someone in the audience will want to ask it. Okay.
Sure, thank you very much, Alexandra. While I am also very much into soundscapes and collaborations, and also into the fact that everything can be a poem, so I think we have a lot of things in common here on stage, I find nature leaking into my own poetry almost without my without me realizing it. Just in probably the same way that, you know, like nature or pollution leaked into my childhood. So it's the other way around, that sometimes I feel like nature's taking revenge, and it probably is, but also I'm aware that that's quite a anthropomorphism, if I get the word right, sorry. So, and what I'm trying to do now is, like in my latest book, it brought me to poems in which I think about hierarchy and power, because how we deal with nature is of course a political thing. And thinking about hierarchy, I found a lot of striking thoughts in the Bible, not because I'm such a pure Christian. I am Christian, but also because a lot of stories in the Bible deal with power and with hierarchies and with suppression. So I have two poems dealing with water somehow. Both also deal with the Bible, and the first one is dedicated to the Fridays for Future movement. And I'm going to start in German because I write in German, and then I switch to Karen Leder's English translation. Vom Wasser kommt alles, das spricht. Das Wasser kümmert es nicht, dass alles, was wir sind, aus Wasser besteht. From the water comes all that speaks. The water does not care that everything we are is made of water, as children are made of their progenitor's faulty gene set that splits into its component parts, like the ghost of a fluid returning to nothing but two gases. We will wish one day we could dissolve our own parasitic kind into morning mist. But take care what you wish for. Once we wished for one who could come and turn water into wine. It's all the same to the water. We will wish we could escape the levels that keep rising year on year, even if only for one day a week, a Friday perhaps, und sei es an einem Tag in der Woche, freitags vielleicht. So I'm like, the more books I publish, I think it's a process of learning somehow to start being aware that you do have a voice, as a published author, but also as a citizen. So I think it's my job to not only play with nature, but also raise my voice while on the same time not having a clue how to get out of this mess of pollution. So, but I try at least to be aware of having a voice. So, and yeah. So now in the second and last poem, just imagine there's a character in this poem, and imagine it's a male character, and it's a god. It's the biblical God of the Old Testament, the furious one, the very male God, to be honest. But in this poem, he appears in the incarnation of a PE teacher, sports, physical education teacher in white skirts and a long barb. Just imagine he does it again, although he promised he never would, and even pinned a rainbow under the blue ceiling of his gym, so that you would believe him. Wasser, ruft und das weiße Kügelchen des dritten Auges auf seiner Stirn gerät in Bewegung und ihr stürmt los auf die Holzbänke zu, die vor der Sprossenwand aufgereiht stehen. Wer bei 3 nicht oben ist, schreit er im schneeweißen Turnlehrerkostüm, hat verloren. Water, he cries, and the little white ball of his third eye on his forehead starts moving, and you charge off towards the wooden benches, standing in rows in front of the wall bars. Anyone not at the top on count of 3, he yells in his snow-white gym teacher's kit, has lost. Just imagine how the rain is dripping completely and without comprehension from the ceiling. And as time stands still and you watch the rain crashing, watch the crashing itself. It runs down your cheeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful mix of poetry and discussion. My question was going to be about essentially related to these big questions of what is the role of art? Does art make anything happen? What does this kind of poetry actually do for whoever reads it, listens to it, witnesses it? But I'll open it up to the audience, and are there any questions? We have a mic. So if anyone has a question, we have 10 minutes.
Speaking of nature, I wonder how many of our present-day generation kids, our grandchildren perhaps, how many of them have got a chance to look at the nature, get out of the concrete jungle and, getting a chance to have a dip in a running stream or river, that kind of thing. We have denied them their communion with nature, in fact. So, see, I am reminded of our father of our nation, India, M.K. Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who said, nature has everything to satisfy our needs and not our greeds. So, the people in the modern ages have become so greedy, they go to any extent to plunder the bounty of nature. So I think, is it not a time that we should go back to nature, like perhaps Wordsworth and all that, and glorify what nature has given to us? Question anybody can answer.
As human beings, I think we are not able to watch nature as it is, because while we're looking at it, we're already part of it. But also we could, of course, perceive nature as something that we are already part of. But then that would mean we would have to deal with this in a completely new way. One example is I was I grew up with the thought that going to the zoo is a normal thing because it has to do with education. So I thought, okay, my parents are bringing me to the next city, to the zoo. This is something, of course, I'm going to learn something from this. And when I myself became a mother, I had to process this again. And I took my kid 2 or 3 times to the zoo only to learn that this is not something we should do anymore. We should not have zoos anymore because it's not possible to see nature in a zoo. If we want our children to see nature, we are the generations with, like, in the history of humanity, we have the best means to, like, due to our media development, we have the best means on our hands to really show our kids an ice bear in his pure environment and not in cages, for example. Or so I think we have to process on our own perception what nature is. And in that sense, I think the youngest generation, the Gen Z and A, they are then Gen Z, this is what it's called, I think, Gen Z and Gen A, they are much further than I am already. For example, when my kid was in the zoo, like not the first time, but perhaps the 3rd time, she started processing on that herself and told me, "Mom, I don't want to be here. Why are we looking at our colleagues, our friends being in cages? Isn't it obvious that they can't live here? I don't want to be here again. Just show me a documentary. I just want to be on YouTube." And I found this. I needed some time to really to get over of this romantic thought of me educating my kid to nature. And then I thought, no, I'm not the right person who can do this. I need to learn from my own kid what nature can be.
In between, you mentioned about the French philosopher Guattari's 1,000 plectures. How you connect to our interconnection? You connect with me in Kerala, the rhizome theory. How you connect that rhizome theory in eco-politics? That is my question. Guattari.
Maybe through a feeling rather than a conceptual framework here. I don't know. I think it's tricky. For me, their writing is something that becomes embodied, and it embodies in the body, and it dissolves the body. So I think as a concept, how does it work in ecology in India? It's about creating fluid change and about observing different systems of environment, nature, the external, internal. So looking at street children here and how they work together, looking at how street dogs protect the people with no homes. We were in Aurangabad and we had some spare food, so we went to give some food to some people who are living in temporary shelters on this wasteland. They have no food, no water, and we went closer to them, and then all the street dogs came around us and started barking. And then a woman came out from this camp, from the homeless camp, and she came to the front, and all the dogs became quiet and were calm. And then she took the food and stuff, and we went away. So this relation between multi-species, between dogs, packs of dogs. I mean, they talk about wolves, also about street children in Mexico. Looking at these organizations and how they come together to help each other and how maybe they can be expanded or thought about, really. Yeah, and to go back to the first point about what we can do with the children, there's a writer, maybe you're familiar with from Tamil Nadu, Wavan Aves, who's an activist writer. He wrote this book, Intertidal, and presented it here last year. We saw him speaking a couple of weeks ago, and he's very much into getting children to participate in the ecosystem, getting them to go to the beaches, and he shows them a crab, or they find a crab, and then they learn the life story, or they learn about why the tide comes up and down. And this engagement and participation, I think, is the key to how we get the generation reconnected from this removal. And also with Zoe, Zoe runs projects which also engage teachers and stuff.
Yes, I was also thinking about that, the point about the children and the sort of lack of connection, and that's something that I've worked on with Adrian and Luna, and also working with teachers to suggest ways to them of taking kids outside for a walk. So the idea, I mean, that doesn't seem like a very a very difficult thing to do, but sometimes the poetry can be a kind of pretext for thinking in this relational way that you're describing. It can be a kind of pretext for participation, for bringing people together, for giving a way into looking at things. Adrian and Luna's work is particularly interesting in that way. It's been great to work with them in schools in Wales, but also here this week, thinking about improvisation and connecting ways of thinking about place. Yeah.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more. I could see that there was at least one more question, but you can have a chat to the speakers.
I will.
Yeah. Thank you.